The Imperium, or the Imperium of Man, is the name for the largest galaxy-spanning human empire. Founded by the Emperor of Mankind in the 30th millennium, the Imperium has become a shadow of its former self, and in the 41st millennium stands for something very different than originally intended. What was meant to be a unification under the Emperor's vision of a science and logic-based humanity has become warped by the influence of a civil war known as the Horus Heresy in the 30th millennium. During this civil war, mankind was exposed to all manner of phenomenon, including the influences and servants of the godlike entities living within the dimension known as the warp. This led to the rise of faith, not just in the warp entities as gods, but the people began to view the Emperor himself as a god of his very own. With the Emperor's entombment on the Golden Throne at the end of the Civil War and his inability to influence mankind towards his science and logic-based ideals, faith that the Emperor is the one true God has festered and grown unchecked to the point that this religion is now one of the most powerful institutions and tools within the Imperium's empire. Its beliefs are law, and to question the Emperor's divinity can often be a death sentence. However, while the faith side of things slipped over time, the Emperor's xenophobic ideals did not. The Imperium actively seeks the extermination of all other intelligent alien life in the galaxy. While these ideals may be at its core, the Imperium is an infinitely more intricate and complicated unification of humanity. Consisting of a multitude of departments and institutions, a galaxy-wide empire requires a mammoth execution of administration. All of mankind is expected to serve and contribute towards the maintenance of the Imperium, no matter their living situations or the practicality of their planet. The Imperium visits its planets to collect tributes known as tithes on a regular basis. These tithes vary from conscripted soldiers and staff to machinery, food, ammunition, clothing, and any other goods manufactured or living that the Imperium requires. This is the cost the Empire demands to remain the dominant unified force in the galaxy. With the Emperor catatonic and broken upon the Golden Throne, the Imperium is currently run by a council of 12 individuals called the High Lords of Terror, headed by Rabute Guilliman. Guilliman carries the title of Lord Commander of the Imperium and is one of the recently returned Primarchs, a genetic son of the Emperor who led the Ultramarines Legion of Space Marines during the Horus Heresy over 10,000 years ago, and has been on a form of life support for the last few millennia before being revived. The other 12 members are all high-ranking members of departments within the Imperium, usually representative of the branches within the military, religious and trafficking sectors. Being the highest positions within the Imperium, it is their job to govern on a day-to-day basis in line with what they believe to be the Emperor's wishes. Contested decisions within the Imperium are voted upon by the High Lords, often with the weight of billions of lives on the line, like when Bin Day should be. While supposedly being a united front and for the people, the position of High Lord has always been one of politicking. Many underhanded dealings and backstabbings have occurred to get to and maintain this sought-after position. Something Rabute Guilliman has no patience for, and in present day, as he now holds the position of Imperial Regent, which is the position second only to the Emperor himself, means the High Lords have become more advisory positions, as their rule can be single-handedly overturned by Guilliman if he so chose, but powerful positions nonetheless, especially when Guilliman's not about. Next, let's take a simplified look at the more visible departments of the Imperium. The standing army for the Imperium is known as the Astra Militarum, which consists of billions of on-the-ground soldiers fighting the majority of the Empire's wars across thousands of different battlefronts. With humanity being so varied, the manner in which the Astra Militarum present themselves is not as a uniformed fighting force, but instead a patchwork of different cultures, backgrounds and fighting styles, which is why soldiers may be armed, look and fight differently from unit to unit. The Astra Militarum are the core of the Imperium's military might, and are present on nearly every battlefield in some form or another. The Imperium uses their sheer numbers to overwhelm foes in the majority of cases, and the loss of life is an expected calculation, rarely a consideration. The very existence of the Astra Militarum emulates the horror of real-life war, particularly attitudes attributed to wars in which lives of men and women are expended callously while the high-ranking officials sit safely in their offices. You, the individual, mean nothing to the Imperium, and maybe that is the price to pay for the semblance of safety some planets have. There are many other forces at the Imperium's disposal, including an Imperial navy of starships also called Navis Imperialis, an armed force of warrior nuns called the Adepta Sororitas, working directly for the Imperium's state religion department known as the Ecclesiarchy or Adeptus Ministorum. The Adeptus Arbites, which are the Imperium's police force stationed on each human world to enforce the Imperium's laws. As you can tell, this is already getting complicated, and there are many more wings of the military branch of the Imperium. We also, of course, have the Adeptus Astartes, commonly known as the Space Marines in Warhammer marketing. A rare sight on the battlefield, despite being the poster boys of the setting. These are genetically enhanced super soldiers, suited up in power armour and armed with guns that shoot explosive bullets. The Space Marines are the finest warriors of the Imperium, and a valuable resource not to be squandered like that of the Astra Militarum. Each of these military branches deserve a video of their own, as these simplifications do not do the best parts of them justice, just a mere breath of the coolness they contain. The Imperium believes it is embodying the will of the Emperor. The God Emperor, Lord of the Atheists, who is worshipped as a saviour of humanity. The Imperium's state religion is propagated as fact by the previously mentioned Ecclesiarchy, enforcing the worship across all of the Imperium's galaxy-spanning worlds, believing that if humanity just believes hard enough, the Emperor will save humanity and mankind will rule the universe in peace and harmony. This belief is often enforced with extreme violence, threats, torture, and of course, fear. Their religion contains a large element of bigotry towards anything not considered human or human enough. This obviously extends to all alien life, therefore being an element that needs to be cleansed, as well as elements of humanity that do not fit the bill. Mutations, interspecies breeding, and evolutionary divergence can all be considered heretical and punishable by death. There are some exceptions to the rule, usually if utility outweighs repugnance, which has led to abhumans serving within the Imperium, notably hulking ogrins, nimble ratlings, and more commonly subjugated psykers. There are, of course, shades of grey within the Imperial cult, with some being more puritanical than others, and is yet another institution with a storied history of politicking and clashes over interpretation of beliefs and the best way to enact servitude. The Imperial cult is a dark irony, the antithesis of the Emperor's original plans for the people of the Imperium. To not believe or search elsewhere for answers through, science and logic will lead to public censure, with one exception being the machine cult of Mars, which is tolerated due to an ancient treaty agreed by the Emperor himself over 10,000 years ago. And there's another kind of exception, being that the majority of Space Marines do not see the Emperor as a god, but are just as devoted to his ideals, or the current interpretation of his ideals. Oh, and the custodes, and the... If you were to read a lot of the face value information available online, and in the war game supplements, you'd be led to believe that living under the Imperium is a living nightmare, in which everyone is enslaved to serving dirty great city-sized factories and war fronts. And you can find those elements, yeah, for sure. But the galaxy is a place of near infinite scale. Contrary to the taglines, there is not only war. Life does exist, bars exist, holidays exist, dating exists. The best way to engage with living under the Imperium is to remember it's an overarching government. Each planet still has its own governing factor, and some planets are not always deemed necessary to have a heavy Imperium presence. Therefore, each planet, while it is required to provide its tribute, it also has its own economy and structure of civilization. Imagine Earth was invaded by aliens who subjugated our governments, but then said they're too busy to stay, so left a lazy ambassador who sits in the embassy playing video games all day, just to ensure he wouldn't forget who's in charge, but for the most part they buggered off and left us to get on with it, while occasionally popping back to Earth to pick up a bar of Cadbury's and give us a lecture before swiftly leaving again. This is the experience of a lot of planets in 40k. The footprint of the Imperium remains, usually in the form of the Adeptus Arbites and department representatives, but humanity on these planets can have a semblance of a good life, career, and even enjoy entertainment. You of course have the other end of the spectrum, planets entirely dedicated to manufacture, breeding of soldiers, planets in the righteous grasp of the ecclesiarchy, burning people at the stake for looking at the wrong person the wrong way. The imagery you see in a lot of Warhammer art exists within the setting. It's there for a reason. The nightmarish aspects of the Imperium are exactly that, and entire planets are engulfed in poor living conditions, near constant work, corruption, and elements of this dystopia exist across the entire Imperium. Even the nicer places to live still have ghoulish servitors and a presence of the Imperial cult. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the answer to what's it like living under the Imperium is not one answer. Much like life on Earth as we know it, different places have different experiences and different qualities of life. While Warhammer, which is a war game setting, will obviously promote the grim dark side of its narrative in order to sell miniatures and engage with its audience, it's also worth remembering that there's another side to this universe that exists. We just very rarely get to see it, but it doesn't mean it isn't there, and doesn't mean you can't find a way to relate to the very question of what's it like to live under the Imperium, when you yourself live on a single planet with such variation. Now apply that to a galactic scale, and that's what it's like to live under the Imperium. Thanks for watching.